إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Surah Anfal, the first ayah we did yesterday, which ended with وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Follow or obey the commands of Allah and Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, His Rasul, Allah's Rasul, if you are believers. Now these ayat, the first two that we read, which is the second and third ayah of Surah Al-Anfal, they tell some signs of believers. Who are those believers? So the intent here is that everybody should keep on checking themselves that do they have these signs of Iman in them or not. If they do, then they should give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase those signs, those manifestations of Iman. And if somebody does not have them, then we should work to inshallah establish those within ourselves. Innamal mu'minuna, the believers are those alladhina idha dhukira Allahu wajilat qulubuhum. People, they are those people whose hearts are wajilat. Their hearts idha dhukira Allah, when they listen the talk of Allah or when they get a reminder about Allah. So when they hear about Allah or when they are reminded about Allah, this remembrance causes their hearts to take an effect by way of awe, or they are inspired. So the meaning would be that because the heart finds peace with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. And here it talks about, and in many places, other places in the Quran as well, it says this word has been used, wajilat, that their hearts take an effect, they become awe-inspired. So it's not really that fear, because fear involves restlessness. For example, the fear of a snake or a harmful animal, it makes you restless. But the awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is that awe which is out of respect, which is out of honor of someone, that you really hold them in a high esteem, in high regard, so your heart take effects because of them, or when they are talked about. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talked about, or whenever the dhikr of Allah or the remembrance of Allah or a reminder about Allah, they listen to it, their hearts take an awe. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And whenever the verses of Allah are recited over them, زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, their iman increases. So if I remember the hadith correct, Sayyidina Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu anhu was asked that, are you a person of Iman? Are you a believer? So he said, which Iman are you talking about? If you are talking about that Iman which means that I believe in Allah, I believe in the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam and all the other prophets, and similarly those articles of faith, the books and the angels and the prophets of Allah and the day of judgment and the all decisions, destiny being in the hand of Allah, Jannah, Jahannam. If you're talking about that Iman, yes, I'm a believer. But if you're talking about that Iman which is mentioned in the first few ayat of Surah Al-Anfal, I can't really say for sure about myself. Because one Iman is that all of us have that Iman, which is that we believe in Allah and those articles of faith that we just talked about. But then there is levels of Iman in which it becomes more perfect and even more perfect. And that, when we talk about Iman in that way, then it is a forever fluctuating thing. If you work on it, it increases. If you don't work on it, it automatically, the effects of Iman, the light of Iman, they start to decrease if you don't constantly keep on working on it. So these things, these ayat, they are talking about the effects of Iman, the perfection of Iman. So everyone has a perfect Iman, but to further increase in Iman means the effects of Iman further increase in them. So whenever they recite the ayah or the verses of Allah recited upon them, they increase in their iman. زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And the third feature mentioned here is that they rely upon their Rabb, their Lord. What is the meaning of reliance? Tawakkul, that Prophet ﷺ has said, أَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ وَتَوَكَّلُوا عَلَيْهِ. do a decent level, a decent extent, to a decent extent, do your seeking, and then rely on Allah. So what would that mean? That because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this principle in this world, and because it is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whatever we are looking for, we have to work for it. So we work for it, but we keep it to a decent extent. What does that mean? That our mind and our heart does not fully become engrossed with that doing. Number one. Number two, it should be our firm belief in our heart that the doer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My doing is only because this is the system of Allah, but the real giver after all my efforts is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ala rabbihim yatawakkalun, they rely upon their Allah, their Rabb. Alladhina. Now these three things, these first three things that were mentioned, that their heart become inspired when they remember, or when they hear about the remembrance of Allah, or the reminders of Allah, and when the Quran or the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of whatever sort, are recited upon them, their iman increases and they rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things relate to the inner self of the person, the batin, or the hidden self of the person, the personality of a person, which is unseen, which is within a person. Then the two signs, الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. These people establish salah, and whatever we've given them, they spend from it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These two relate to the external self of a person, which means يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ or إِقَامَةِ الصَّلَاةِ means that they establish the salah, which means that they take care of the salah with all the etiquettes, all the sunnahs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, they spend that charity which has been made mandatory, for example zakat and zakatul fitr, zakatul mal and zakatul fitr, and also all sorts of spending over their family, over their friends, over their children. Whatever they do, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has recommended it, they spend it. So these are the five signs. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned ulaika humul mu'minuna haqqa. These are the people who are the true believers, who are the believers in reality. Lahum darajatun inda rabbihim. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned three rewards. Lahum darajatun inda rabbihim. They have high levels, high status in the eyes of Allah, before Allah. This refers to the things of the first three qualities of the inner self, that those who have whose heart tremble or take inspiration from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their hearts increase in iman, and they rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you have these three conditions, then they get a high status before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is referred to as these people who are sabiqun. These people who have worked on their batin, these people are sabiqun. These people have a high status before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa maghfirah, and forgiveness. Forgiveness refers to الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ. It goes back to those people who establish salah. So those people who establish salah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's several hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that mention that if somebody establishes salah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives them. So the meaning here is that those people who obey the basic commands of deen, the chief commands of deen, they are also promised maghfirah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa rizqun kareem, and on their spending they get rizqun kareem, which is honorable provision from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dignified in this world and in the hereafter. So if you spend in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah gives you honor, and Allah gives it back to you in a much more honorable fashion. And also on the day of judgment, your spending will be brought back to you, and it will be returned to you with a lot of respect, with a lot of honorable return, which is of course the Jannah and the blessings, the bounties of Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all these three. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the high levels of iman, be them considering, relating to our inner self, our outer self, our actions, our iman, our faith, everything, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen, and accept it from us, and make us steadfast on our iman. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.